grab your popcorn and dim the lights. It's time for Dean and Dave Do Movies.
I will avenge you, father.
I will save you, mother.
I will kill you, Fjolnir.
I will avenge you, father.
I will save you, mother.
And I will kill you, Fjolnir.
Welcome to a review of The Northman.
The Northman? I guess the short and curlies of it. 2 hours, 17 minutes. Directed by Robert Eggers. He did The Lighthouse and The Witch as well.
Mm-hmm.
Cinematographer, Jaron Blash. Composer, 2 companies, Vessel and Triangle. Now let's go to the main actors. We got Alexander Skarsgård as Prince Amleth, the main protagonist of the film.
Mm-hmm.
Anya Taylor-Joy, who is Olga of the Birch Forest. Beautiful and wonderful actor.
Mesmerizing.
And then what other actors do you think are important?
We got Nicole Kidman, who plays Amleth's mother. We got Ethan Hawke, who plays his father. William Dafoe makes a appearance in this film as well.
A beautiful appearance.
Yeah, he is very entertaining. I think that's everyone you need to know.
Yeah, and then there's another poll is
Or
Bjork.
that you'd recognize. Yeah, Bjork as an actress, not a singer in this one. Movie's rated R. So, very violent.
Very much a thriller. Takes its time. Is it a thriller? Or is it more suspense? Action thriller?
I'd say maybe, action thriller. Let's go with that.
Sounds pretty hot to me.
Yeah. The story centers around Amleth as a boy, learning to become a man and maybe a king through his father.
Yeah, so Prince Amleth, King Orvin, and then the Queen Gudrun, who is Nicole Kidman, Ethan Hawke playing the king. But starts off as a simple tale of a prince to become a king, goes to revenge.
We pick up years later, and Amleth is now a man, trying to find his way in the world. He's out for revenge. And follow him on his journey, and it's an adventure. It's mythical. It's otherworldly at times, but it's ultimately a story about family and revenge and the hero's journey, as many stories are.
That sounds well like the short and curlies of it.
Short and curly. All right.
Oh yeah, sorry, big stretching. Oh, it feels good. Ooh. Oh, nice lower back. Actually, it wasn't the lower back at all. It was the shoulder blades. What are my thoughts on the movie?
Mm-hmm.
Overall, big fan of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it had excellent pacing. I thought the storyline had lots of action, but the action was very well placed in the sense of when there was a fight scene, and it was quite brutal. You can speak about when they're playing that Icelandic ball game.
Right.
Or even one of the earlier scenes where they're raiding that village. And it's very intense, but then after it's over, there is this like calmness or this story where you kind of learn more context, and it's a good contrast between action and storyline. Beautiful as well.
Yeah, very stunning.
So it was filmed in Iceland and Northern Ireland, and fun facts for you: they wanted everything to look so precise that before they built certain scenes and before they developed, they had it thoughtful. So when they were in Northern Ireland, they actually planted grass from Iceland a year in advance so that it would grow over, because they wanted that much detail. If there's a village that was going to be shot, or certain houses that were shot from afar, maybe on top of a cliff, they would use plaster to make it look like wood and take easier approach because of the scale of things. But when it came to the close-up shots where you could see the details, they would use the same kind of wood.
Okay.
They would they would go to museums in Norway. When they did the Longship, they actually got all their ideas, and they found out the type of wood, the type of nails, how it was designed, and they built it up to the same specifications.
Gotcha.
They even learned how to row the old Viking technique And when they filmed, Alexander Skarsgård mentioned that Robert Eggers wasn't going to have it towed. He wasn't going to put in a motor. It was just them. Nice. So as you watch it, a lot of action, great storyline, beautiful cinematography, wonderful shots, but very authentic. And I thought that really brought a beauty to it where even though it's a set, it really did feel, it felt like a historical piece in just the quality and the attention to details that they spent.
Right, yeah, felt lived in, yeah.
As well as when they would do certain scenes, like there was the Berserker before they raid that first village. I don't know, 20 minutes into the film, they have a scene where they're dancing around a fire and they're prepping themselves, and they had the dance was choreographed, and they went to a natural. Every actor would just make sounds and howl.
Sure.
Howl like the wolves.
Yeah.
And it was very accurate. They used examples from, I believe it was the Byzantine Empire?
Byzantine. Yeah.
Byzantine Empire. And they did their research, and it shows when you watch the film. I don't have an extensive knowledge before watching the film, but then afterwards, it took what I did know before the movie and actually made me interested in going back and learning a little more, or at least reading into why they did it a certain way.
Right.
And if you come out of it wanting more, it's a better scene. It's always better wanting more.
Definitely. Yeah. Causes some intrigue. It's a very visceral film, I think.
Big word. What's it mean?
Visceral, just very, I don't know, gutsy, very, a lot of feeling to it, very, very raw, very...
What'd you feel?
That's a great question. Yeah, no, I think I definitely expounding on what you had already expressed. I think it's, just a very intense, very raw, beautiful film. I told you before, the way it's shot too is very, very artistic. I would describe it as Lord of the Rings meets Wes Anderson for a lot of it. I was just looking at some scenes recently, and a lot of kind of just static shots of, you can see the landscape in the background, and the characters are kind of all within frame and moving around, and kind of moving on cuts of a close-up of a person, and just very visually stunning. Lots of vast landscapes. We got the volcano in there, the Icelandic volcano, the Hekla, which is in Norse the gateway to hell. We see that a lot. Mostly CG in this movie, but very just moving scenes and just very expansive scenes. And it draws you in. It's just a stunning movie.
Hekla, what's that mean in Icelandic? Because you said Icelandic volcano.
Yeah. So I think in Icelandic it means a short-headed cloak. So not too interesting. But in Norse, it's the gateway to hell. So that's quite the dichotomy there.
It's almost more interesting knowing that it's not as interesting by the name. It makes the name that much more interesting.
I guess so, yeah. No, I didn't think much of it before, and I still kind of don't. Discussion.
What do you like about the film? What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of what you like?
As someone who operates primarily on spite, I like that this movie was about revenge and was about spite.
Animosity, I like it.
Yeah, I think so. We follow. The film starts with Amleth as a child, and you're kind of getting introduced to this world, and you kind of realize there's this, this wide-eyed kid who's the son of Ethan Hawke.
Yeah, King Arvind, and so he's Prince
Arvind,
Amleth and Queen
Prince
Gudrun.
And the king is pretty weathered at this point. He's seen a lot of battles. He knows his time is almost up. And he's, trying to impart as much knowledge as possible onto his son Amleth. And so you kind of see part of that. You see this wide-eyed kid who's, excited to see his father come back from battle, who's going through these rites of passage with his father to become eventually king. And that gets accelerated a little bit. And then we cut to Amleth as a man. And then we kind of pick up on his journey from a child and his quest for avenging his father and avenging his family, and that's kind of where the movie really picks up, and from there it's just it's all very raw, very intense, lots of action, lots of violence, but really well done. The choreography, I think, in this movie for the action scenes is pretty impressive, I think.
The dance around the fire was impressive enough for choreography, let alone the fight scenes. So I think that goes to show you something about it.
For sure. A lot of ritual in this movie, a lot of tale of revenge.
A lot of bums.
A lot of bums, yep. I'd say nudity in general, there's a decent amount going around, right? Do we not see Anya Joy Taylor little naked? No, I think we do.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
In the another ritual scene where they do their dancing and whatnot. Remember, it was like some kind of ceremony where they have like flowers, and there's like a lady singing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Couldn't tell you what it was, but definitely a movie where I wouldn't bring a first date.
Yeah, definitely not. No, a bit too violent, I would say. Maybe, yeah, it's like a very raw movie. Like, if you like that kind of aspect of things, like, I think this is definitely up your alley.
If your first date involved a conversation about Robert Eggers, The Lighthouse, or The Witch, then you would be in the
it's
right
a nice
place.
segue, definitely.
Segue to what?
Well, segue to watching this movie.
Nice.
Yeah. But generally speaking, movies are not a good first date idea.
Yeah, it's more of a second.
Yeah, maybe. There's not a lot of talking you can do while you're watching a movie, right?
Third.
Like, third. Yeah, I'd say third.
Maybe fourth.
Yeah, definitely. Once you've
Dare
got
I
the
say
talking
fifth?
out of the way, maybe.
Potentially sixth then.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Definitely six.
Well, if you liked all that, what would you dislike about the movie? Because you sound pretty partial to liking it.
There was not much I disliked about this movie, you know? Like, visually beautiful, action was great, the pacing was great, the story overall, I think you were saying before, it was supposed to be like a Nordic Macbeth, which I think it really hits that note, right?
They said the elevator pitch was Hamlet with Vikings.
Hamlet, sorry.
We're
I
not
like
in the
that.
theater, you can say it out loud.
I
It's
think
okay.
that's an accurate description of it. I think if you like Gladiator or you like things like Diablo, I think this is definitely up your alley. I think those will kind of satisfy those desires.
The God of War remake.
God of War, you know, it's just a man on his journey. He's got to do what he's got to do, and you're just along for the ride. Really appreciate there's some magical realism in this film. There's definitely moments where things from Norse mythology are incorporated, and you don't necessarily know whether they're real or they're imaginative or they're just metaphorical or what, but they're beautiful and just they're meaningful as well. And I think that's what I really liked about this film. It wasn't afraid to go there when it needed to. Rate those aspects of Norse mythology.
The aspects, I think, also what it wasn't afraid to do was leave you questioning, so it wouldn't answer.
Yeah.
For example, actually, I'll talk about that later time. I don't want to give anything away, but there definitely is one fight scene where it ends almost leaving more questions than answers.
True. I think I know which scene you're talking about as well.
And if you're an Eggers fan, meaning you've watched Lighthouse and The Witch, you'll definitely like this movie as well. I'm with you. I have a lot of positives, but my one, well, it's a negative and a positive. It starts off, or not starts off, but he's young Prince Hamlet. He's really
Right.
young.
Yeah.
And then once he has to leave his homeland and he has to go away on his boat and say his little phrase that we said in the beginning, then it ends with him being an adult with the other berserkers, and they do the ritual. They have the choreographed dance. They go into their manic states.
They howl.
And, yeah, they do their howling, and then they do their raid. After the raid, he sees Bjork the Seeress, and that kind of starts off the main plot of the movie.
Right.
And then as he discusses his fate or leaving with, I guess, in the Vikings, was it chiefs or kings? Because, like, I think in that raiding thing, whatever the boss was, they had an interaction about him leaving, and it was really heartfelt, and I was happy that it kind of didn't do the cheesy 80s build up, and it just came to him being a warrior, being strong, and continuing on with the story.
Right.
But I feel just without those interactions, I didn't have enough information, so they brushed past it. So part of me is like, well, I like that because I don't like filler,
Right.
or I don't like filler that isn't necessary.
Sure.
But maybe there could have been something. But you know what? Again, it left me wanting more. So I think overall it's a positive.
I kind of just looked at that aspect of his life as him just kind of trying to survive and just kind of falling in with whatever group he could to kind of get by. That's kind of just what I looked at as like how he joined that group and how he got to where he was as an adult, where we start following him again. It's just a matter of survival from that point, because he was pretty young when his dad died and his mom's gone, and like he's just trying to live. Doesn't really understand the world, and he's just trying to get by, and that's why he falls into the group that he falls into. But no, I agree with what you're saying. It would have been cool to see more, to have a better understanding of this group and how he came to be with them and that aspect of his journey.
with the over 2 hours,
Sure.
if you were going to cut anything out, that would be the perfect thing to cut out.
Sure. No, totally agree. Yeah, I think for me too, it's just like seeing the importance of like ritual in this movie. There's definitely several times throughout the movie, whether when he's a child or when he's with these warriors or whatever, that ritual plays a big part in this movie in terms of transitioning into the next phase of their lives or the next phase of battle or whatever. But it's definitely a big part in this film.
Which really spoke to the Norse god aspect, the Viking aspect, where there were no atheists or agnostics. Their beliefs were as real as everything else. I believe the phrase was as real as the grass they walked on. It's nothing to do with that. And they took it seriously. They did it in a way that didn't feel like they were overdoing the rituals. They weren't overdoing the sayings. Like how some people say, "Oh, God, help me," or they'll say these things occasionally. They're always referring back to Odin and the strength and fate, and they were very consistent with it. So when they had these ritualistic scenes, it wasn't out of nowhere. You could see the build-up, and you could see the faith, and it was very natural.
Yeah.
It was very in place, and there's nothing out of place in that regard.
Definitely, yeah. No, it didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like over the top or anything. It just felt very, very normalized and very, well played, I think, overall. And that's something I think that I really appreciate about the film.
How many short and curlies from 1 and 10?
Oh, short and curlies. You know, I think I could give it a solid. I think I'll give it like a solid 8. I think it was a solid film. I think the cast is great. I think the performances were great. I think the visuals, the direction, the cinematography were all really great. I think what I look for in a movie, especially if I go and see it in theaters, is just to kind of be swept up into a world, and I think this film did a good job of that. And I think, I think I would give it a solid 8 short and curlies for this film. Yeah,
It's a decent bush right there.
right. It is. Yeah,
I would have to say similar, but I'd even go 9 short and curlies out of 10.
9.
Almost full bush going on.
Oh wow. Okay, so going forward, 9 is a. What's 10? If 9 is a full bush, what is 10?
Yeah, you're right. 10's the full
Maybe
bush.
10's too much bush.
Well, not for the situation if it's out of a 10. I think that's a good point. What would it be? But regardless,
We'll come back to that.
my thought is 9 out of 10 short and curlies.
Okay.
Almost a full bush.
Yeah, we'll put a comb in that.
Nice. So what I really got away, or what stood out to me, was just I want to watch it again.
Yeah.
When people ask about the movie, it's overwhelmingly positive. I highly recommend it, but I also recommend it that I saw it in the theater. It's not playing in the theater. If you are going to watch it, you want to have a good definition TV, and if possible, surround sound or really good quality, because a lot of the stimulation, a lot of the entertainment comes from the overall feel and the atmosphere.
Yeah.
So if you're just seeing it like on an airplane with your headphones on, it might not be the best. So I would definitely recommend it if you're looking to make a nice cozy night where you have you want to watch a movie, not even cozy, because it's not a cozy film.
No.
It's an entertaining film.
Yeah, and if you want to be immersed, I feel like it does a good job with that through the visuals, through the story, through the music even. Yeah.
So between the two of us, 17 out of 20 short and curlies.
I guess so. That's a lot of curlies. So I was looking it up. I have it here in my notes. We were talking earlier about the box office. Originally, this film was not deemed a success. And so this was June 15th, so a little under a month ago. The gross at that time was $34.2 million. We checked it today, and it's actually, and the budget was, I believe, $60 million. Yep, $60 million. The budget as of today, the worldwide gross, was $68 million. So it's more than doubled since less than a month ago. So this technically movie, which was deemed initially a commercial bomb, I guess a bomb, because it didn't even get close to its budget, is now arguably a bit of a success.
I would definitely call it a success. And I don't know what the other box office numbers would be from The Lighthouse or The Witch, but it definitely feels like more of a, from Robert Eggers, like more of a cult following, in the sense of the people that really like it will invest, will share, and will bring it to their friends. So I feel like this movie, if it is not like a Fast and Furious and it's not like a
Right.
international blockbuster,
Right.
it's definitely a movie that it's going to have its following and it's not going to go away. It's going to be brought up again in conversation.
Yeah, no, I would definitely watch another movie within this world by Robert Eggers. I think I would definitely watch that. Whether it's maybe it's a prequel, the story of how Amleth went from boy to man. I think that would also be a very intriguing story. I definitely could watch more of this. So
I definitely think if they sold it as socks, I would get a pair.
I don't even know what that would look like.
Well, in the beginning of the movie, which I did find really cool, they would have certain scenes where they would describe either a land or the Northman, or when I got to the gates of hell, and it had the old Norse writing, and it would translate underneath.
I did like that. Yeah.
So if they had the Norse writing, looked pretty good on a pair of socks.
Is that writing not the same writing style they use for The Witch? Because I feel like it is.
That's a question for later, Dean.
I haven't watched The Witch, but I've seen like the writing, and it kind of looked. It was very stick figure like, just like the Northman.
That's a very good question. One that I can't answer.
I guess we'll have to watch The Witch and decide.
And we'll keep you posted. Any good spoilers that you want to bring up?
Spoilers. Man, that's a good question. Spoilers.
I have one.
Okay, go.
I alluded to it earlier.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, there was a sword. And this
Mm.
sword was given in a sight. Or I guess in a seeker. He was told to get a specific sword.
Yeah.
And in order to get the sword, he had to dig a hole. And it was like in a hill. I don't know. It was like in a cave.
Like
I
a
don't know, it was
mound.
buried.
Well, it was a boat underneath, like a buried boat, basically, right?
I believe it, now that I'm thinking about it, I think it was like
A BB.
BB. I thought it was a Viking. I thought Viking funerals were only when you were on the water and then it got shot with fire.
Oh.
But I'm wondering if it was the Viking funeral where they bury you, kind of like in Egypt, where they would bury you with all your goods.
Oh, like in the pyramids.
Yeah, because it was
Right.
like some certain warriors or some certain figure that had this sword in his hand. And
Right.
he had this chair and all these goods around him in the longboat. And he climbs down, it's kind of creepy skeleton. And there's this wonderful, kind of intimidating fight scene where he has to battle this skeleton with a sword.
Yeah, very Diablo-like. I felt like that's what that really reminded me of. So, anyways, continue.
Great reference, very Diablo-like. And it was actually very, because it was kind of scary at first. Like, it gives you a little bit of a jump, but then it was just intense because he's fighting and he's not doing very well during the fight. It's a lot of him trying to recover. But after the fight scene happens, it goes from a scene of him destroying the skeleton, and then it's just him standing, and it's almost like the fight went on in his head.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if maybe that was like a trial or something that he went through internally. Maybe that was the
Right.
acceptance that he had to have, and like maybe that was his fate testing him, or maybe that was him preparing himself mentally. And so I found that very interesting. And again, that's a Robert Eggers feeling,
Right.
where it's really up to you. I don't know if there's a right answer. I don't know if maybe that was thrown in there just to make you think. But
Right.
that was a great scene.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed that scene too. And then when he comes out of there too with the sword, it's amidst like it's darkness and there's just like moonlight on him, like a full moon on him as he's kind of like moving through the little farm there, and just visually, it's just very beautiful. And just very I think the other thing I really appreciate about the movie too is just like the symbolism throughout is super prevalent. And yeah, no, that was definitely an awesome scene. I'm trying to think what else spoilers wise.
It doesn't have to be a spoiler. If you just think of one scene, what's your scene of choice?
Well, I think even for me too, I think as I kind of expressed to you earlier, it's just like the interesting parts of like how Amleth, whether he's a boy or he's a man, he's a witness to so much violence and just so much, I guess, death and destruction too. And he's not always a part of it. Maybe reluctantly he's a part of it. He witnesses his father get brutally murdered after he's just told and gone through this ritual with him as to like, you need to, take up the mantle of my kingdom when I'm gone. And that kind of happens in a very expedient manor, and then as a man, he's part of this Viking Nordic raiders, I guess, where they pillage and rape these towns. And he's not. You can tell from the movie, he's not as engaged with it as some of the others are, but he's definitely participating in it. He's
a killer.
He's a killer, but he's not necessarily over the top with it or overly engaged with it. But here we are, and like we're still sympathetic to him because he lost his father, because he's been betrayed. That we still believe in him and we want him to succeed, even though he is
anti-hero was the word that I was reading.
I think you're right. Yeah, I guess that's what we're looking at. He is the anti-hero. And I think that aspect of it is kind of interesting because, he is a part of all this violence, and he is a big witness to violence and maybe a victim of violence to some extent, but and a creator of violence. But I still found through the whole movie that I was still rooting for him, and I just found that kind of interesting. As like, why do I care about him still, even though knowing he is, he's violent himself, and he's getting this revenge, and maybe it's justified, maybe it's not. But I just found that distinction kind of pretty interesting. And two, just kind of looking at the sons of his uncle who betrayed
King Arvund,
Amleth, who betrayed the uncle of Amleth, who betrayed Amleth.
Fjolnir or
Fjolnir.
One of those.
Fjolnir. I think that's it. There's an umlaut over the O. Not very good at pronouncing those, but
in fact, you could say bad at pronouncing it.
You could say that, yeah. Just seeing also the distinction too between Amleth, who grew up without a father to some degree, and then now the son of his uncle who murdered Amleth's father, and just seeing how entitled the uncle's son is, and just his treatment of his slaves, workers, whatever, versus Amleth is interesting to see, because like, would Amleth be the same had his father continued? Was that the big difference between his father, the king, and the uncle? Like, I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting to see also too the tree of life, right? In this movie, you see it visually too. It's not just like a metaphorical thing. You visually see that tree of life, or that family tree, I guess. Of
his
Amleth.
Tree you're seeing, and I forgot about how powerful that was to watch. Where he would see his mother and father, he would see himself, and then later as the film, because he was told in his fate that he'd have 2 children, they would be affected, and that the daughter would have to avenge him.
Right.
And then you see a boy and a girl after you find out that his, I guess, wife at that point, you would say she was pregnant with twins?
No, yeah. Like, immediately, foresaw that, so.
It did a great job of, like, saying things in, like, a poetic / mysterious way, and then they would tie it together. So the Tree of Life was used perfectly.
I think it's more, I think I misspoke. More like a family tree, like a literal family tree, it seemed like.
That's way better, because it was like it was growing out the branches of his family, and then it worked its way. But instead of a normal family tree where it would work its way from the top, and then, because normally a family tree goes to like the bottom branches are the new ones.
I would think you're right, yeah.
This worked the other way up. I could be mistaken though, but it worked its way from the bottom up the tree.
It was more like a 3D tree, I think, too, and like you kind of went out in different directions and kind of had different branches and stuff, but like it wasn't like just a metaphorical thing. Like, you get to see this tree, and you get some of the people involved with it, at least, which was kind of interesting, very different, very literal.
It was literal. It made sense, and it was another good way to break where they did a good job of making like the mysticism and then reality, where it would seem historical, and then they would throw that scene in, and it was like a good palate cleanser and kind of remind you that there's a lot of visual representation of the fantasies and of the not rituals or fate, but mystical, I guess, side more so, like the more like fantasy style where they would do that, and it looked really well done. Yeah,
like fantasy influence, but very just like symbolic of like what is going on in the story itself. And again, like it's nice to kind of have those elements to kind of reinforce the story, right? Because you're aware of what's going on literally, but to add that extra emotion, that extra feeling to it, I think it really just drives everything home, and just especially with kind of Norse flair, right? Like, just really just brings the tone of the movie all together, I think, and just it more powerful. And it's not something you see with like, like say like Fast and the Furious, right? So
I just wanted to hear out the floor. I was gonna throw in these nuts somewhere in it, but I should have done it and drive home. I was gonna say drive home these nuts, but then you carried on, and I was like, how am I gonna work these nuts? Couldn't work these nuts into it.
What's nuts in Nordic, I guess, is the question. That's what you should have done, is just thrown that in. Nordic nut. It sounds like a corn nut or something like that. A bag of corn nuts.
It sounds like they'd be
Nordic nuts.
It sounds like they'd be enjoyed cold.
Spiced Nordic nuts.
What would they be spiced with? Do the Nords like spice? I don't think so.
I feel like they don't.
I feel like because everything's so cold.
I feel like it's like things that
Salt.
are very salty. Yeah, maybe pickled nuts, pickled Norse nuts. That's what we've gotten to here.
I think that's a natural conclusion.
Definitely.
Thank you for listening. If you want to subscribe on our Patreon, only
You'll have to wait because it's not set up yet.
no. In fact, this hasn't even released. This is our first attempt.
That's a lie too. This is like our third attempt, maybe.
We are very unprepared, but we're trying our best.
Yeah, no. So stay tuned. Bet we'll definitely get better.
Enjoy these Norse salted nuts.
Craving a movie podcast with wicked wit and sizzling style?
Look no further. Dean and Dave Do Movies is your ticket to nonstop cinematic fun.
Don't miss a beat. Rate us 5 stars, subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts.
And share our show with fellow film fanatics.